You know what nobody tells you about being humanity's first xenobiologist? The job description should really include a warning about becoming the galaxy's favorite pet project. I'm Jake Martinez, and I've spent the last 3 years on research station Kepler-Nine, which orbits a gas giant in what the Galactic Council generously calls human-adjacent space. Translation: close enough to Earth that we won't get homesick. Far enough that we can't cause any real trouble. The thing about being the newest species in a galaxy full of civilizations that have been around since before your planet cooled is that everyone treats you like you just learned to use opposable thumbs. Which, to be fair, we did figure out fire pretty recently on the galactic timeline. But still. Take my research partner, Qrix. He's a Zelani, which means he has 4 arms, skin like polished bronze, and the kind of superiority complex that comes from belonging to a species that invented faster-than-light travel while humans were still figuring out agriculture. Qrix has 3 doctoral degrees, speaks 14 languages, and never lets me forget that his people were exploring the outer rim when mine were painting on cave walls. "Jake Human," he said this morning, using that patronizing tone that makes me want to throw my coffee at his perfectly symmetrical face, and perhaps today you can assist me with the simpler cataloging tasks while I handle the complex behavioral analysis. See, that's the thing. Every alien species we've encountered has been polite, helpful, and condescending as hell. They pat us on the head, metaphorically speaking, and tell us we're developing nicely for such a young species. The Qrix gave us basic medical technology like they were handing out participation trophies. The Vex shared their agricultural advances with the enthusiasm of grandparents showing a toddler how to tie their shoes. But here's what's been bugging me for months now. There's this pattern in the incident reports that nobody wants to talk about. See, the galaxy has its share of nightmare fuel, void stalkers that can phase through solid matter and eat your face, plasma worms that turn entire asteroids into molten slag, shadow beasts that exist in 11 dimensions, and think 3-dimensional beings make excellent snacks. These things kill everything they encounter. Everything except, apparently, humans. At first, I thought it was just statistical noise. Humans haven't been out here long enough to run into many apex predators. But then I started digging deeper into the xenobiology databases, and the pattern got weird. Really weird. Freighter crews reporting close encounters where the monsters just left. Research teams stumbling across feeding sites and walking away unharmed. Military scouts who should have been turned into component atoms describing predators that seemed almost curious about them. "Qrix," I said, pulling up another incident report on my workstation. "Have you noticed anything strange about human-predator interactions in the outer systems?" All 4 of his arms stopped moving, which for a Zelani is like a human holding their breath. "Jake Human, such matters are beyond your current understanding. Perhaps you should focus on the mineral composition reports instead." Right, because clearly asking questions is still too advanced for my primitive human brain. But that reaction told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just aware of the pattern. They were actively trying to keep us from noticing it. Which, naturally, made me absolutely determined to figure out what the hell was going on. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Just when you start asking uncomfortable questions, it decides to provide some very uncomfortable answers. Qrix and I were doing a routine biological survey of Kepler-Nine's third moon when our proximity alarm started screaming. Not the gentle beeping that means, "Hey, you might want to look at this." The full-throated wailing that means you're about to become something's lunch. "Void stalker," Qrix whispered, his bronze skin going pale as titanium. All 4 arms were shaking as he checked our sensor readings. Class Alpha. Fully mature. Now, I'd seen the footage of what a void stalker does to living things. Imagine a cross between a panther and a nightmare, roughly the size of a shuttle, with the charming ability to phase in and out of normal spacetime. They hunt by materializing inside their prey's personal space and working outward from there. The Galactic Council classifies them as extinction-level threats, and the official response protocol is run very fast and pray to whatever deity you prefer. Qrix was already reaching for the emergency beacon when the thing materialized 20 meters from our survey site. It was beautiful, in the way that natural disasters are beautiful. Midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light, muscles that rippled with predatory grace, and eyes like molten silver that fixed on us with the kind of focus that usually preceded violent death. It took one look at Qrix and its lips pulled back to reveal teeth that could probably cut through our shuttle's hull. Then it looked at me. And something impossible happened. The snarl faded. Its ears, which had been flattened against its skull in pure aggression, flicked forward with what I could only describe as curiosity. The Void Stalker tilted its head like a confused dog and took a cautious step toward me. Qrix made a sound that might have been praying in his native language. "Easy there, big guy," I heard myself saying, which was probably the stupidest thing I've ever done. But the creature's posture had shifted from about to commit murder to something almost playful. "Nobody needs to get eaten today." The Void Stalker sat down. I'm not kidding. It sat down like an enormous, otherworldly house cat and continued staring at me with those silver eyes. That's when Captain Rex Holloway chose to make his entrance, his battered freighter dropping out of hyperspace with all the subtlety of a meteor impact. Rex is what happens when you take a stereotypical gruff space pilot and dial everything up to 11. Think gray beard, cybernetic arm, and the kind of scars that come from making very poor life choices in very dangerous places. His voice crackled over our comm system. Well, another human making friends with the local wildlife. Another? I managed to ask while keeping my eyes on the Void Stalker, which seemed content to just sit there and watch me like I was the most fascinating thing it had ever encountered. "Kid, this is the 15th time this month I've had to extract a human from a situation that should have ended with them being redistributed across several star systems." Rex's shuttle detached from his freighter and began descending toward our position. And every single time, the nasty beastie in question was acting like they'd just met their new best friend. The Void Stalker's ears flicked toward Rex's approaching shuttle, but it didn't move from its sitting position. When Rex's boots hit the ground, armed with enough firepower to level a small building, the creature actually yawned. "Yep," Rex said, shouldering his plasma rifle with the air of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out too many times. "Definitely the same thing. Qrix, you can stop hyperventilating now. It's not interested in killing anyone today." "This is impossible," Qrix wheezed, his forearms still shaking. "Void Stalkers are apex predators. They don't just sit peacefully with potential prey." "That's the thing," Rex said, lighting up a cigarette that probably violated 17 different station regulations. "They do exactly that, but only with humans. Been happening for months now, ever since we started spreading out into the outer systems. Command's been keeping it quiet, but word gets around." The Void Stalker stood up, gave me one last curious look, and phased out of normal spacetime as casually as walking through a door. "So," I said into the sudden silence, "anyone want to explain what the hell just happened?" Rex blew out a stream of smoke and grinned. "Kid, if I knew that, I'd probably be rich instead of running freight to the ass end of nowhere. But I know someone who might have some answers." Dr. Vera Kowalski turned out to be the kind of person who could make a root canal sound boring. She was a behavioral psychologist working out of a converted cargo module on Rex's freighter, surrounded by enough data screens to make a stock trader jealous and the kind of coffee that could probably strip paint. "The phenomenon," she said without any preamble, "has been documented in 47 separate incidents across 8 star systems. The pattern is consistent, reproducible, and completely inexplicable according to current xenobiological models." Vera had the deadpan delivery of someone who'd spent years explaining obvious things to people who refused to see them. She was maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair and the kind of intense stare that suggested she could psychoanalyze your childhood trauma from across the room. 47 incidents? I asked, settling into what passed for a chair in her makeshift office. "How is that not galactic news?" "Because," Vera said, pulling up a holographic display that made my workstation back on Kepler-Nine look like a children's toy, "the Galactic Council has classified it as a developing situation requiring careful study. Translation: they're scared out of their collective minds and don't want to admit it." The display showed incident reports from across human space. Freighter crews encountering plasma worms that should have turned their ships into cosmic slag but instead seemed content to escort them to the edge of the system. Survey teams stumbling across shadow beast feeding grounds and being completely ignored. Most disturbing of all, agricultural colonies reporting that the local carnivorous plant life had stopped trying to eat their settlers. The plants are the really weird part, Rex said, refilling his coffee with something that smelled like it could power a shuttle. I mean, you expect animals to have some kind of behavioral flexibility. But when fungal networks start playing favorites with specific species, that's when you know something fundamental is happening. Vera nodded grimly. The Qrix have been studying this for months. Their best xenobiologists are baffled. The Vex military command is quietly reassigning human personnel to their most dangerous exploration missions, hoping to figure out what's giving us this apparent immunity. Immunity might be the wrong word, I said, studying the incident reports. Look at the behavioral descriptions. These predators aren't ignoring humans. They're actively curious about us, like we're something they recognize but can't quite figure out. Exactly, Vera said, and for the first time her professional composure cracked slightly. It's not that they see us as non-threatening. It's like they see us as something specific, something that triggers a very particular behavioral response. Rex laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound, so let me get this straight. The galaxy's most dangerous creatures, things that have been killing everything they encounter for millions of years, suddenly develop a soft spot for the species that's been in space for less than a century? The timing is suspicious, Vera agreed. But correlation doesn't imply causation. We need to understand the mechanism before we can determine if this is temporary, permanent, or something else entirely. I stared at the holographic display, watching incident reports cascade past in an endless stream of near-death experiences that had turned into awkward interspecies encounters. What if it's not about timing at all? What if it's about us? Something specific to human biology or behavior that these predators recognize? Vera's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Go on. Think about it. Every other species we've encountered is older than us, more advanced, more specialized. But humans evolved on a death world. We spent millions of years as prey animals, learning to read predators, learning to communicate with things that wanted to eat us. What if that shows? You're suggesting, Vera said slowly, that human evolutionary history has equipped us with some kind of universal predator communication protocol. I'm suggesting, I said, that maybe we're not as harmless as everyone thinks. Maybe we're just really good at convincing dangerous things that we're not a threat. Rex stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another one. Kid, that's either the most brilliant theory I've heard in 20 years of hauling freight through hostile space, or the most terrifying. Why not both? Messed, Vera asked, and started typing commands into her workstation with the kind of focused intensity that suggested we were about to find out just how deep this particular rabbit hole went. The human eye, Vera said, projecting a detailed anatomical diagram that made my optical nerves feel self-conscious, that is evolutionarily unique among known sapient species in several key ways. We'd been working for 6 hours straight, cross-referencing human evolutionary biology with xenozoological behavioral patterns. And Vera had that manic gleam that researchers get when they're about to prove something that will either revolutionize science or get them committed to a psychiatric facility. First, she continued, highlighting different parts of the projection. The sclera. That's the white part of your eye. Most Earth predators have dark sclera, making it difficult to determine where they're looking. Humans evolved prominent white sclera specifically for communication. We can track another human's gaze direction from remarkable distances. Okay, I said. But how does that relate to alien predators not wanting to eat us? Because Vera said with the satisfaction of someone about to drop a conversational bomb, human eyes evolved to send a very specific signal to Earth's apex predators. We're one of the few species that developed the ability to communicate non-aggression through eye contact alone. Rex looked skeptical. You're telling me that staring at a saber-toothed tiger was a survival strategy? Not staring. The opposite. Vera pulled up footage from Earth's nature preserves, showing human researchers working with various predators. Watch their eyes. See how they maintain contact without direct confrontation? Soft focus, relaxed facial muscles. deliberate blinking patterns. It's a complex communication system that says, I see you, I respect you, I'm not a threat. The footage was remarkable. Researchers approaching massive predators with nothing but body language and eye contact, creatures that could kill them in seconds, choosing instead to simply coexist. But that's Earth predators, I pointed out. These are alien species that evolved on completely different worlds. That's what makes this so interesting, Vera said, pulling up comparison studies of predator behavior across dozens of worlds. Apex predation follows remarkably similar patterns regardless of evolutionary origin. The drive to eliminate threats while conserving energy is universal. Predators across the galaxy have evolved to recognize submission, fear, aggression, and territorial challenge. She highlighted behavioral markers common to predatory species: ear position, posture, vocalization patterns, even chemical signals. Humans accidentally evolved to broadcast the perfect combination of not-a-threat signals. Our eyes, our micro-expressions, even our unconscious body language hits every single marker that says safe to ignore in the universal predator playbook. I felt a weird mix of pride and existential dread. So you're saying that millions of years of being hunted by everything with teeth turned us into galactic therapy animals? Essentially, yes. Vera's deadpan delivery made it even more surreal. Humans are the only known species that evolved specifically to communicate with their predators rather than simply fleeing or fighting. We became so good at it that it works on predators we've never encountered before. Rex was quiet for a long moment, smoke curling around his weathered features. That's why the Council's been keeping this quiet. They're not sure if we're an asset or a liability. Think about it from their perspective, Vera said. Every other species maintains carefully controlled boundaries with dangerous wildlife. Humans show up and accidentally befriend everything that should kill them. From a galactic security standpoint, that's either incredibly useful or incredibly dangerous. I laughed, but it came out a little bitter. So while every other species sees us as cute primitives who need protection, we're actually the only ones who can handle their nightmares. The irony is exquisite, Vera agreed. Humans spent centuries thinking we were weak because we avoided direct confrontation with predators. Turns out we were developing the galaxy's most sophisticated threat de-escalation protocols. But this raises bigger questions, I said, staring at the holographic displays full of incident reports and behavioral analyses. If we can communicate with apex predators, what else can we do? And more importantly, what happens when the rest of the galaxy figures out what we actually are? Rex crushed his cigarette under his boot. Kid, something tells me we're about to find out. But first, we need to prove this theory works the way we think it does. Vera nodded grimly. I know where we can get a test subject, but you're not going to like it. The way she said it suggested that not liking it was a significant understatement. The nightmare crawler looked exactly like its name suggested. Imagine a bear crossed with a spider, scaled up to the size of a small shuttle, and given too many teeth and an attitude problem that could be seen from orbit. The thing was currently sedated in a reinforced containment unit aboard Rex's freighter, courtesy of some very nervous Karathi researchers who were happy to let crazy humans test their theories on something that had eaten 3 xenobiology teams. This is absolutely insane, Qrix said for the 15th time, his forearms ringing together in what I'd learned was the Zelani equivalent of nervous sweating. Nightmare crawlers are responsible for more xenobiologist deaths than any other single species, which makes them perfect test subjects. Vera replied with the kind of calm that comes from either supreme confidence or complete dissociation from reality. If the theory works on a creature this aggressively hostile, it'll work on anything. The plan was simple in the way that suicide missions are simple. We'd wake up the nightmare crawler in a controlled environment. Let it see Qrix first to establish baseline hostile behavior, then have me approach it using the communication techniques we'd identified. Rex would be standing by with enough firepower to turn the creature into cosmic dust if things went sideways. I still don't understand why I must serve as the control subject, Qrix complained, checking his emergency beacon for the 20th time. Because I explained we need to prove that the effect is specific to humans. If the creature reacts the same way to both of us, then our theory is wrong and we're all idiots. If it tries to eat you but ignores me, then we're on to something. And if it eats both of us? Then we're dead idiots, Rex said cheerfully, running final checks on his plasma cannon. But at least we'll die advancing the cause of science. The sedative wore off gradually, giving us a perfect view of exactly why nightmare crawlers had earned their reputation. The thing woke up angry, its multiple eyes focusing with predatory intensity as it tested the limits of its containment. When it spotted Qrix through the transparent barrier, every aggressive instinct kicked in at once. The creature's response was immediate and terrifying. It threw itself against the containment wall with enough force to make the entire freighter shudder, mandibles clicking in what universal translator protocols identified as threat display indicating imminent violence. The sound it made was like a fusion reactor having a bad day. "Okay," I said, my voice only shaking a little. "That's definitely baseline hostility. Rex, you ready?" "Kid, I've been ready to vaporize that thing since we brought it aboard." Vera released the containment field, and the nightmare crawler immediately oriented on Qrix with the kind of single-minded focus that usually preceded someone becoming a light snack. But before it could charge, I stepped into its line of sight. The change was immediate and profound. The creature's aggressive posture shifted, its multiple eyes refocusing on me with what I could only describe as curious confusion. The threatening vocalization stopped, replaced by a series of questioning chirps that the translator couldn't parse. I took a slow step forward, maintaining the soft eye contact pattern that Vera had identified, keeping my posture relaxed and non-threatening. The nightmare crawler tilted its massive head, watching me with the intense focus of something trying to solve a puzzle. "Easy there, big guy," I said, taking another careful step. "Nobody needs to get eaten today." The creature made a sound that might have been laughter if you squinted your ears just right. It lowered its body to the deck in what was unmistakably a play bow, like a dog inviting someone to chase it. "Well," Rex said, lowering his plasma cannon, "I'll be damned." Qrix was making small, squeaking sounds that didn't require translation. I reached out slowly, giving the nightmare crawler plenty of time to object, and touched the side of its head. The creature leaned into the contact with a purr that vibrated through the deck plates. "The theory works," Vera said, but her voice carried a note of something that might have been fear. "Which means we need to have a very serious conversation about what this makes humans in the galactic context." The nightmare crawler, apparently deciding that I was the most interesting thing it had encountered in its presumably violent life, settled down beside me like an enormous, weaponized pet. "Yeah," I said, scratching behind what I hoped were its ears. "I'm starting to think we might not be the harmless primitives everyone assumes we are." Rex lit another cigarette with hands that were only slightly unsteady. "Kid, I think that might be the understatement of the century." 6 months later, I found myself in the single most surreal job interview of my life. He sitting across from Admiral Thrace of the Galactic Defense Force, while a baby void stalker played with a ball of yarn in the corner of her office. "So let me understand this correctly, Dr. Martinez," the Admiral said, reviewing my file with the expression of someone trying to process information that defied several fundamental assumptions about reality. "You're telling me that humans can essentially domesticate apex predators through evolutionary accident?" "Not domesticate," I corrected, watching the void stalker kitten phase through the yarn ball in what appeared to be pure joy. "Communicate. We're not changing their nature, just establishing that we're not a threat worth their attention." The establishment of the Human Predator Mediation Corps had been inevitable once word got out. Turns out, when you're the only species that can safely interact with the galaxy's most dangerous wildlife, you become very popular very quickly. Mining operations wanted human consultants for asteroid surveys. Agricultural colonies needed advisors for dealing with hostile local fauna. Even the military was interested in our potential applications. "The implications are staggering," Admiral Thrace continued. "Entire sectors that have been considered uninhabitable due to predator populations could be opened for colonization." "With proper protocols," I said. "This isn't a magic immunity. It's a communication system that requires training and understanding. Send the wrong human into a situation they're not prepared for, and people die." The baby void stalker had gotten itself tangled in the yarn, and was making pitiful mewling sounds. I stood up, carefully untangled the little nightmare, and set it back on its feet. It looked up at me with those molten silver eyes and purred. "Which is why we need the Corps," Admiral Thrace said. "Trained specialists who understand both human evolutionary psychology and xenobiological behavior patterns." I nodded, though part of me was still trying to process the absurdity of it all. Humanity had spent decades thinking we were the galaxy's awkward newcomers, the species that needed protection and guidance from our more advanced neighbors. Instead, we'd accidentally evolved the ability to have peaceful conversations with things that could eat starships. "There is one concern," the Admiral said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "Some members of the Council are worried about the long-term implications of humans having this kind of influence over apex predators." I could understand their concern. The same evolutionary traits that let us communicate with dangerous wildlife might also make us very good at other forms of manipulation. If you can convince a nightmare crawler that you're not a threat, what else might you be able to convince people of? "The Corps will have strict ethical guidelines," I said, "and oversight from multiple species. This ability comes with responsibility." A chime from the Admiral's communicator interrupted our conversation. "Admiral, the new arrivals are ready for orientation." "Ah yes," Admiral Thrace said, standing up. "Dr. Martinez, would you like to meet your first class of trainees?" I followed her to the observation deck, where a group of 20 humans were getting their first look at the Predator Mediation Training Facility. It was, essentially, a cosmic zoo designed to teach people how to have polite conversations with things that could end civilizations. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced over the intercom, "welcome to the strangest job in the galaxy. You're here because evolution played a practical joke on our entire species, turning us into universal translators for anything with too many teeth." The trainees laughed nervously as they watched a plasma worm sunbathing in a specially designed habitat that looked like it belonged on a vacation planet, rather than a military installation. "Over the next 6 months, you'll learn to recognize predator communication patterns, understand your own evolutionary advantages, and hopefully avoid being eaten by something that just wanted to say hello." One of the trainees raised her hand. "Dr. Martinez, is it true that the Qrix are offering us full citizenship in exchange for predator mediation services?" "Among other things," I said. "Turns out, when you're the only species that can safely clean up dangerous wildlife situations, you become very valuable very quickly." The baby void stalker had followed us to the observation deck and was now entertaining itself by phasing through the floor and popping up in random locations, causing several trainees to jump. I scooped it up before it could cause a diplomatic incident. "But remember," I continued, "with great power comes great responsibility. We're not just monster whisperers. We're ambassadors for our entire species, proving that sometimes evolution's biggest mistakes turn out to be its greatest gifts." The Void Stalker kitten looked up at me and made a sound that the universal translator rendered as something like agreement tinged with affection. I scratched behind its ears, still amazed that this was my life now. From thinking we were the galaxy's pet humans to becoming the universe's apex predator negotiators. Evolution, it turned out, had a sense of humor after all. And the punchline was that the species everyone thought needed protection was actually the only one qualified to handle the things that scared everyone else. Not bad for a bunch of primitives who'd only figured out fire a few million years ago. The baby Void Stalker purred, and I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best jobs are the ones you never saw coming.